every church has a slightly different sound system, and it's like car doors. You know, there are instant intelligence tests as to how you put them on, how you open them. I usually fail first time, as I just did there. I was getting the wrong way around. It's good to be with you today. I feel almost as though I've been kind of in a digital space the last 3 days, because I've been in York, I've been back in Durham, I've been down in London, I've been various meetings and things, and now I'm back here. And that's just, you know, a week in the life of an over-busy bishop. And suddenly being faced with these questions is a bit daunting, because I'm probably somewhere between an immigrant and an alien, in that I'm not that into the digital world in the way that my children, and I suspect pretty soon my grandchildren, are. I remember seeing a cartoon in Private Eye a couple of years ago of two fond mothers looking down at a baby crawling on the floor, and he's got a mobile phone in his hand, and one mother saying to the other, he's got a texting age of 5. And you know, this is the new kind of status symbol, when your baby can text faster than you can. And I have a sense of all sorts of things shifting, bits of ground shifting that I thought were secure, and that's, to me, always, we talk about earthquakes, always, when you use it metaphorically, it's very exciting. If it actually happens, I've never been in a real earthquake, but I imagine that is very, very scary, and we'll continue to wait and hope and pray and see what's going on in New Zealand. But I think what I'm picking up is that something is going on which is, as it were, halfway between rational discourse and music. That it's neither of those things, and yet it shares something with both. Obviously, one of the things about what's going on the board at the moment is that it comes at us in prose, and prose happens sequentially, and you have to input it sequentially and so on, you have to read it sequentially, whereas with music, all sorts of things can happen simultaneously, and though there is obviously movement of time in music, you get simultaneity and counterpoint and so on. And I suspect that in the digital age, one of the things that's going on is that several things can happen simultaneously, and you're getting a kind of interaction which you don't get in the old way, either by lecturing and response, or by writing a book or an article and having people read it and so on. There's something which seems to be crossing over, and that's quite exciting. And I think it's also, and others of you will reflect on whether this is characteristically postmodern or not, but it's something of a victory of the ENFP worldview over against the ISTJ worldview in Myers-Briggs terms. Yeah, that was the great thing about the difference between the IBM and the Mac, was the olden days when they ruled the world, was that the IBM was very much ISTJ, sort of thoughts going in, and the Mac was very intuitive. And the new iPhone, which you shake and funny things happen to it, and you pull things, and my grandchildren can already operate those very quickly. You just put them in their hands, and you don't have to teach them. They figure it out in a trice, and it's tapping into something which is something about the human person, something about who we are, which much of Western culture has kept on hold, has put in the area of play, in the modernist sense of play, that is irrelevant, trivial recreation, rather than reality. And one of the things that's happening, I think, is that all the stuff that you're into is happening in a world where we're starting to discover that play is actually far, far more important than we ever thought it was. Obviously, anyone who studies child development knows how important play is. Those of you who follow the Church of England lectionary, the regular Anglican day-by-day lectionary, will have been reading the book of Job recently, and a wonderful passage which came up last Thursday, I guess, Thursday morning, about considering Leviathan, and this description of Leviathan, the great whale, the great sea monster. And in Psalm 104, it says that God has made Leviathan in order to play with it, or with him, or with her, whoever it is. One of the rabbis said that God divided the day into 4 parts, and in 3 of those, God was running the cosmos, and in the 4th one, God went and played with Leviathan, which is fascinating when you consider that what we know about whales is that they spend up to 1/3 of their life playing. Actual playing. A lot of what they do is not productive in the sense of sort of a Marxist economic, it's either, you know, feeding or fighting or reproducing or whatever. It's simply playing. And so the question is, these whales are very smart. Who are they playing with? God's very smart. Who's he playing with? According to the psalm, playing with the whale. You know, you see what I'm saying? Maybe there is a space opening up in our contemporary culture where play is making a comeback and where it is creating a space where different sorts of things can happen. That's my kind of big picture reflection on this, just hearing what was said. Beyond that, I have a question as to whether what's happening with the digitalization of information and discourse is actually qualitatively really different from what went forward. Maybe pegging back on what I've just said, but hold on to that usual sort of postmodern discourse here. Is it qualitatively different? And if so, how? Can we name that? Or is it, in the nature of the case, something that you can't name, you just have to feel and play with it? Or is it simply massively quantitatively different? In other words, is it just that this is more communication, much faster, much more quickly, so that messages can flash around the world? So I was sitting there yesterday trying to write an article, getting messages from people in America, in Edinburgh, this way and that, text messages, email messages, feeding them in, sending things back. Is this just much more and much faster? Or with that, has something actually happened to the nature of the exchange itself? Rather like I feel about, I think about sociology and history. As a historian, when sociologists talk about, you know, as sociologists we want to say that this is what the first century was like, I want to say, actually I think all you're really doing is bringing a new set of questions to the historical table. I don't think you're bringing a special sort of insight that historians are forbidden to have. You may be actually quantifying and studying how societies work. That's fine. That's actually a sub-branch of history which we historians shouldn't have ignored before. So what I'm saying is all the stuff which is now out there digitally, is it actually really doing something that is qualitatively different? And I just don't know the answer to that. And I suppose one of the questions which I have, not a Luddite question, but a theological question, is with any new innovation, you've got to have somewhere out in perhaps left field the question coming at you, is this a new form of building the Tower of Babel? Is this a new way in which the human race gets together and says, now that we can do this and this and this, we can construct a world which reaches up to heaven so that we are it? And if so, what is God's answer going to be in destroying that tower and in scattering and confusing our languages? And the questions about, as I was talking to somebody on the way in, the ethics of the blogosphere, which is something that concerns me a certain amount because somebody who has occasionally been alerted to people's blog sites where the most bizarre things are said about yours truly, in some cases, and don't go and look at them, please, and just don't need to know. My own response to that is, look, I'm too busy, guys, I do not go to blog sites, mostly, and maybe that's a Luddite reaction, but there are questions about the ethic of the blogosphere, because you know, when you're behind a screen, it's very easy to forget that there are real human beings out there who have real, yes, feelings and lives to lead and ambitions, and you can crush them or play with them in unhelpful and unwise ways. It's like road rage. You know, when you get behind the wheel of a car, inside a hermetically sealed tin box, you somehow perceive yourself and others in a different relation to if you're actually sharing a genuine social space with them, and even more so, how much more with